What we just saw this morning on the streets of Minneapolis is another outright murder by federal officials. And let me just be clear. Those federal ICE officers are absolute cowards. I'm a Marine veteran standing here telling you to your face they are unprofessional, pathetic cowards. Because if a Marine, an 18-year-old Marine, did that in Iraq in the middle of a war zone, he would be court-martialed because it is murder. And you pathetic little cowards who have to wear face masks because you're so damn scared couldn't even effectively wrestle a guy to the ground, so you needed to shoot him. This is why ICE needs to be prosecuted. Yeah, I voted to defund it, but ICE, you need to be prosecuted. And Director Lyons, who's running ICE right now, I hope you're hearing this from this Marine to you. You guys are criminal thugs. You need to be held accountable to the law if you think you can enforce it. And you need to be prosecuted right now.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. We need more of this kind of fire from our elected representatives. That was Seth Moulton, a congressman from Massachusetts and someone I've known for a long time. Seth was one of the first people years ago as a candidate to warn us about Donald Trump's Hitlerian ambitions. Seth has a reputation for saying things that are not poll tested, and even though we don't always agree, with Seth Moulton, you always know where he stands. He doesn't wait to see where the political winds are blowing. We need more of that kind of conviction in the House today, or the Senate. Seth recently announced he's running. If you want to help him out, the link's below. A quick editorial note. We scheduled this interview before the killing of Alex Pretti by a CBP agent in Minneapolis. Seth and I were supposed to talk about Greenland and Donald Trump's unhinged threats towards the people who live here. That's where I am now. It's been an extraordinary trip, and I will share more about it soon. But given what is happening on the streets of Minneapolis right now, I had to get Seth's take. Here it is. Seth, thanks so much for joining us. I know I promised you we'd talk about Greenland, and I do want your take on that. But given everything that is happening in the States right now, in Minneapolis in particular, and your perspective on it, you've been so vocal in leading the response. I just want to get from you a sense of the mood in Congress right now. Please tell me it is shifting. Please help us understand the politics behind any Democrat voting to continue supporting DHS and ICE. Help us make sense of it.
I mean, this is state-sponsored terror. This is state-sponsored terror that we're watching unfold on live TV. And I never thought in America that I would see this. I mean, this is what you see in Iran, people being executed in the streets. This is what you hear about from North Korea. And this is what we read in textbooks about from Nazi Germany happening in Minneapolis. So there is, of course, outrage in Congress. The problem is that the outrage is really just on one side of the aisle. So many Republicans are cowed into fear. They're such cowards they cannot speak out and simply speak truth to power. In this case, to their own administration, that they are blindly subservient to all day long, no matter how heinous it is.
You just made the reference to Nazi Germany, and it's not the first time. You were the first, in my memory, years ago to issue this warning about Donald Trump's Hitlerian tendencies. And now we're seeing it play out. What do you make of the argument that by calling ICE America's Gestapo, which I've done as well, we are provoking the kinds of incidents that we're now seeing on American streets?
I mean, laughably absurd. Are you kidding me? We cannot speak the truth. It's only by speaking the truth that we can prevent this from happening even further. What's going on the right, and it's among Republicans in Congress, it's among administration officials, and it's among news hosts on Fox News, who aren't really news hosts, let's be honest, they're just opinion people. They are trying to normalize all of this, normalize it so that it goes away, so that we just don't recognize how our democracy is slipping away from us beneath our feet.
Do you see fissures on the right, at least around the centrality of guns in the most recent murder? The hypocrisy.
Sometimes people have asked me, if you could change one thing about Washington, what would it be? And I've often answered, just make hypocrisy matter again. Because so much of this stuff would stop if hypocrisy just mattered, especially on the other side of the aisle. And it just doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't matter to Fox News. It doesn't matter to these Republicans. It doesn't matter that they're champions of the Second Amendment, except when someone on the other side exercising his Second Amendment rights gets shot and killed after being disarmed. So I don't think hypocrisy is going to change things. But I'll tell you a quick story. I was on the Will Cain show on Fox a couple weeks ago. Did all right for myself, came out of the interview, and the first person I saw was a Republican colleague who came up to me and said, "Wow, you really handed it to him." And by the way, that was a bad shot. He said, "I've been in law enforcement for decades, and that woman should not have been killed," talking about Renee Good. And then listen to what he said next. "But of course I can't say that." "Well, wait, excuse me? Why can't you say that?" "Oh, well, I'll just get pummeled, by my own people." So now in a democracy, one side thinks that just telling the truth, which he admitted to me in person, in private, is a political non-starter for him. And that's really screwed up. I mean, and that's when you're losing your democracy, when your own representatives can't speak the truth.
It's Ken Harbaugh with a quick break to tell you about something new. Battle Buddies is my latest weekly show where I try to find common ground with a conservative who I consider a true friend, David Bellavia, the only surviving Medal of Honor recipient from the war in Iraq. A Navy vet, an Army vet from opposite ends of the political spectrum, engaging in a civil conversation like we used to have. From the ICE immigration crackdowns to Trump's takeover of Venezuela, David and I take on the toughest issues of the day with genuine respect for each other, in spite of our very different perspectives. They're not always easy conversations, but they're always important, and that's something we need more of. Respectful dialogue between people who disagree, but who have figured out how to stay friends. Check out Battle Buddies today. 2 vets, 2 views, 1 nation. Find us on the Valor Media Network. The link's below. Thanks.
But the tide does seem to be turning. And provided we're still living in a democracy in November of 2026 and in 2028, public opinion seems to be dramatically shifting because our eyes don't lie, right? We're all seeing the same videos on a loop again and again, and there is no justification for it. I'm tempted to ask your reaction to their justification, which is that, Walz provoked it by not giving ICE agents access. I don't know if I even want to dignify it with the question, but it does seem.
Don't even dignify that. It's so absurd. It's so absurd. And yet none of Donald Trump's actions, like sending a federal force to terrorize a city that hardly has any immigrants to begin with, that didn't provoke it. I mean, it's just patently absurd what they're saying. So we've got to stop dignifying it. We got to start calling it what it is. And we also have to start calling out the Republicans. Like I've been using Tom Emmer's name. Tom Emmer, classmate of mine, coming into Congress, came in as a very reasonable guy. In fact, I happen to know some of his family members through a connection in Massachusetts who have basically all disowned him because he's become a different person as he's become subservient to Donald Trump. And he can't even speak up for these fellow Minnesotans, the citizens that he is supposed to care about as a representative of Minnesota. He can't even speak up because he's so scared and he's just such a freaking coward.
Well, that obeisance they offer to MAGA and Trump, it's got to be costing them electorally because you are seeing finally this awakening amongst the American people. If the polls are to be believed, and I do, because it's not just one, it's not just two, they are all showing Trump's policies not just underwater, but like drowning when it comes to the public's opinion about ICE and DHS and now even Border Patrol. Do you think that is going to help us course correct in November? Do we have enough time for that? Do you know what I mean? Like, is democracy going to work here?
Look, it will help, but it matters how much that correction is.
Right.
I mean, it's shocking to me that 30 or 40% of Americans actually support what Trump is doing. I'd be shocked if 5% supported it. given what you can see with your own eyes, an execution on our streets by officers of the state. But we're not going to change everybody's minds. And what really matters with these midterms is, do we win by a little or do we win by a lot? It matters for two reasons. One, we really need a mandate. I mean, if we can't beat them now, what does it say about our own party? And I've been one for months now who's been saying that Democrats need to do a better job of looking ourselves in the mirror and recognize that we should never have lost the 24 election to a convicted felon. We should never be in this position where it's even a question with what Trump is doing that Democrats should win. And yet there are a lot of races that are still close. So it matters that we take this opportunity to win big and get a big mandate to change this in Congress. But the other reason why this matters is because if the elections are close, it gives Trump the opportunity to manipulate them. It's just much harder to manipulate an election if the Democrats win by 20 points. But if they're ahead by a half a point going into the election or coming out the next day, that's when Trump tries to get involved, right? It's one thing to call the Georgia Secretary of State and say, find me 20,000 votes. It's another to say, find me 1 million votes. And so it matters that we win by a lot. And that's why when there's anything we can be doing differently on our side of the aisle to make sure that we are a solid alternative for these independents who may have voted for Trump in the last election, we need them to vote for Democrats now. We got to make those changes in our own party.
What's your top piece of advice when it comes to those changes that Democrats need to make?
Well, look, we've got to get rid of the old leadership. I mean, I'm running for Senate and have made no mistake about the fact that I'm going to go to Washington if I am elected and not vote for Chuck Schumer. And it's not because Chuck Schumer's a bad guy. It's not because he hasn't been a good public servant for decades. Is that people look at the Democratic Party right now and they see us stuck in the past. I mean, it's crazy that Joe Biden was even running for a second term. And he's just in a line of Dianne Feinstein, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, no one looks at the Democratic Party right now, except for these next generation leaders, and says, oh, they're going to figure this out. And if you look at the big wins we have had since the last election, namely Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, and Zora Mandami in the last election, they're all next generation leaders, and they're all leaders who are willing to run against the Democratic establishment. So the Democratic establishment that just buried the autopsy report, not even willing to admit mistakes so that we can all make changes, the Democratic establishment that continues to empower people like Chuck Schumer, the Democratic establishment that allowed 3 members of the House of Representatives, colleagues of mine, die in the last year. I mean, one of my colleagues, may God rest his soul, we would have defeated the one big beautiful bill on the first vote if he had just died a day later. So we've got to make some changes in our party to show the American people we hear you. We didn't do the right thing in the last election, and we want to do better. And I'll give you another more specific example. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm ranting here, but let me give you another specific example. I go into rooms of Democrats all the time, and I say, how many of you are opposed to Trump's immigration policies? And of course, every hand goes up, right? And then I say, how many of you can tell me what Democrats' immigration policy is? No one raises their hand. Ken, this was the single biggest issue in the last election that we lost. So you tell me if we've learned a lesson when we had a losing position on the single biggest issue, and now we can't even define what that position is other than opposing Trump. Yeah. So we got a lot of work to do.
Last question, and it's because I promised you we would talk a little bit about Greenland. One of probably the most enduring impression I'm going to leave with from this place is just how wounded and betrayed Greenlanders and Danes, and in many cases they're one and the same here, feel about America's posture towards Greenland and Denmark, which is the protectorate of Greenland. And the thing that hits hardest was when Donald Trump said the Danes and our NATO allies haven't done enough. They've never been there for the U.S. Ergo, for some reason, we have a claim on Greenland. But I'm talking to Danish vets here. I'm talking to Greenlanders who are looking at those old photos of coffins coming off of C-130s draped with a Danish flag. And as a combat vet yourself, how does it land when you hear our commander-in-chief disparage nations that literally sent sons and daughters to bleed and die alongside Americans in our wars?
It's disgusting, and it's not surprising from the draft dodger in chief. Listen, there are a lot of Danish families who made tremendous sacrifices, many the ultimate sacrifice, not just for Denmark, but even more for the United States of America, because they came to our aid after 9/11, because they were faithful allies, as we have failed to be to them. There are a lot of Danish families who made sacrifices for America. You know a family that has not made sacrifices for America, that never made any sacrifices during the 20-year war on terror? The Trump family. Where were his sons? Where were they when you and I were serving overseas? Where were they standing up and fighting for America when we were attacked? Where were they serving alongside troops like the Danes and so many others from Europe who were shoulder to shoulder with us in the fight when it mattered?
Well said, Seth. Thanks so much for joining us. Keep up the fight there in DC. We'll talk again soon.
I will.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.